excited to introduce our final speaker. This one is definitely worth the wait. Mike Aragon from Charles Schwab. Mike is the UX and Service Design Manager for Transformation Solutions at Schwab and brings over 20 years of UX, user research, and service design experience to the table. He's going to talk with us a bit about service design blueprinting and how they can serve as a vital tool to help break down the silos we so often see in large, complex organizations. Mike?
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Mike Aragon. I am the Senior Manager for the Service Design and UX teams for our Transformation Solutions org at Charles Schwab. And I've been in this role for a couple of years now, and at Schwab for almost 6 years altogether. And so excited to talk to you about service design as a whole, talk to you a little bit about some of the specific artifacts around blueprinting and our approach to that, and how that works within a very large, complicated environment like Charles Schwab, which is a financial services company that obviously has a significant amount of stakeholders and partners and product owners and some of the silos that we've come across over that time. So we'll dive into some of the challenges we faced and in our approach from a service design aspect of helping to solve for that. And we'll talk about how this all kind of connects with Disney World as well. And so hopefully it'll be a fun presentation. You'll learn something, and then we'll dive into some Q&A after. So let's get started here. Jump in. So one of the first challenges we had at Schwab was the way we communicate and the types of artifacts that are produced within all of our teams. And one of the main things that I think most large companies deal with is that the tools that you use tend to reflect a significant amount of the types of teams that are incorporated within a large scale project. So you have project management, you have developers, and so those tools that they need to do their work tend to then carry over into the artifacts that are produced for business stakeholders, executive leadership, and there's kind of a conflict there in terms of, are these the right tools? Are these the right artifacts for that type of communication? So what we were seeing was a lot of Visio and workflow diagrams, process maps, which are obviously very critical, but sometimes can lose the breadth or kind of end-to-end view that we needed to be able to represent, that went beyond kind of more of the process, but went kind of more across the entire ecosystem. We had tools like Jira, even taking pictures of scribbles on people's whiteboards and different flows and things of that nature. So anyways, that was one of the challenges we identified, is that we didn't think we were using the right communication tools or communication artifacts. And that led us down a path of, well, what could we be using? And to that end, we started to explore service design as a methodology of uncovering kind of more of a more practical way of looking at our organization and our business in a way that kind of made sense, that went beyond technology, went beyond financial services, but something that is a little bit more of, in this case, what we talk about a lot is front stage and backstage. And so this example here of this, kind of play environment where you have the front stage actors and props and band, and then you have the backstage support that is providing all the lighting and background scenery and audio and all the things that make that front stage performance engaging. We started to look at that as a tool or as a lens to say, is there a way that we could take this service design approach, front stage, backstage, and apply it to how we look at opportunities within our ecosystem and across all the different organizations. And it allowed us to kind of start to think about things in a way around, how do we interact with our clients? How do we interact with our operations teams, our call center reps, what systems are we using, critical dependencies, critical pain points. So it allowed us to kind of look at it from a different perspective, but also look at it in terms of a real world kind of like, what is the impact that our clients and all of our different teams internally are experiencing as we support the different financial services that Schwab provides. That ultimately led us to Disney and uncovering some ways that Walt Disney himself, as well as the parks, are set up at both Disneyland and more specifically at Disney World, that we felt as a mechanism to help kind of help the business, our business stakeholders, our product stakeholders kind of understand what we are trying to accomplish from a service design perspective, and create or leverage what Disney had created from this magical client experience perspective, and how does that kind of fit in with what we're trying to do within our financial services model at Charles Schwab. So everyone has some impression of Disney, either by being in the park or experiencing movies, or just knowing kind of kind of the magic of Disney. And so that right away gives us a great connection point, a great kind of anchor point for all the different stakeholders that we deal with. Everyone has some sort of story to tell, or their experience in the park, or things of that nature. So it allows us to kind of frame then service design within that model. So one of the very cool things that most people aren't aware of is this idea around what is called the utilidors. And so this originally started at Disneyland, but they were only able to accomplish a small part of what Walt Disney wanted to do, which was essentially executed at Disney World, where you actually have a complete underground system that mirrors the park. And so when you walk into Disney World, you are actually on the second floor, and you don't realize that because everything kind of gradually increases in terms of where you're located within the park. But there's a whole kind of subterranean, first floor, if you will, that makes up this utilidors within Disney World. And the intent there was to invest in this backstage environment that was really about the support of the magical experience on the front stage. And so one of the examples that Walt gave in terms of why this is important is this: he didn't want characters that you would normally see in Frontierland to somehow pop up in Fantasyland, right? Or he didn't want to see props having to be loaded up on a truck and moved from one part of the park to another. Even in the early days, there was a whole vacuum system around garbage disposal, and part of that was that Walt did not want to see garbage cans being emptied, because any one of those things would break the magical experience, the client experience that he was trying to create, for his customers as they came into the park. It was really that goal of framing the park as a whole, as an ecosystem, as this magical escape, this magical experience, no matter where you were in the park. But he realized he couldn't do that without the investment in the infrastructure in the backstage to be able to support that. And so that's where we leveraged this kind of design and this kind of real world example to explain to our business partners and all the different teams that we work with around service design. That service design is really a way to illustrate how our teams are set up and how they work and how they support front stage activities, such as clients in a branch or clients using your .com website or mobile app. Those are all front stage experiences. But at the same time, you have to have backstage support. You have to have the system infrastructure in place. You have to have your policies and procedures in place. You have to have the people the call centers, the reps that answer the phones, the reps that process work, that scan paperwork in at the branch, and you have to have all these backstage infrastructure pieces in place to be able to execute what you're trying to create on the front stage. And so often we get hung up as an organization, as a company, and this isn't specific to Schwab or even really in financial services, it's much more broad than that. We get hung up on the thing that is right in front of us on the front stage. And so all of our time, our investment, our energy goes into the front stage support and applications and features that we want to create and execute on. When in reality, you need both, right? You need both the front stage and backstage to be able to work together as an ecosystem to support ultimately the goals of that business, the goals of that product, and what you're trying to deliver to your customers. So let's talk about some examples then around how did we implement this at Schwab. And we've done this in a lot of different scenarios, and I'll kind of talk you through some of the ways that we've incorporated design thinking as well in part of this. But the real key part of service design is bringing everyone together to with the goal of getting to a place of shared understanding. Oftentimes, this is some of the things I've experienced at Schwab and other places that I've worked, is you get to a place of a shared agreement or a shared head nod environment where people are agreeing to whoever's talking or presenting and saying, yeah, that's a great idea. That makes sense. Let's go that direction. But they probably don't have the same level of understanding that the person who is presenting, right? And that's where we wanted to really try to evaluate, are we using the right ways to communicate to achieve that shared understanding? Are we getting to a place where the mental model I have in my head is matching my colleague's mental model, or a business partner that works in a different city or in a different part of the company? Like, are the mental models we have the same, and we truly are having that shared understanding experience? And so we leaned into service blueprinting as a mechanism, as a tool, an artifact to achieve that shared understanding. So a service blueprint really is that piece that allows you to see both the front and backstage. It allows you to provide that context or build the context within current state as well as a future state. So what are we, what is our ecosystem today, and then what do we want it to become in the future? And so it's a great tool because then you can orient around kind of the framework, but in a lot of different contexts, all again with the goal of shared understanding. A lot of the key benefits of the service design blueprint is understanding weaknesses within your ecosystem, critical dependencies that you have within your ecosystem, identifying kind of closed off silos, and seeing where maybe certain teams have lack of awareness around what other teams are doing, and again, pulling that forward so that they can get to a place of shared understanding. And then from that, you can identify opportunities for improved process and policy implementation, improved technology solutions like automation. So just again, you're really trying to frame this in a place where everyone collectively starts to see and orient around like, whoa, we really have this major upstream problem that all of us are experiencing different levels of pain downstream, but we need to solve the upstream problem versus trying to put band-aids on all of the different downstream impacts. And then collectively, we can start to brainstorm around what is the right approach or what is the right solution for that. One of the key things around a service design blueprint is the people that you pull in to help build it. It is the subject matter expert. It is the decision makers. It is your technology teams. It is the people who work in the branches and people who work on call centers and operations teams. You want to have a diverse set that truly represents the ecosystem that you're working within, in that particular product or project that you've been kind of charged with. You want to make sure that you're collectively bringing every view into that process so that everyone has a chance to participate in that. This is a really rough example of what a service design blueprint can look like. If you do a Google search on service design blueprints, you'll see lots of variations. This particular approach we called our heat map approach, where we kind of just threw Post-it notes up on a wall, or we kind of started to virtually use whiteboarding tools to capture what are the main steps beginning to end that cover this particular process, who is involved, what systems are being used, what are the digital touch points, and then what are the pain points, right? And start to identify what are the things that are problematic internally, externally for our clients. Again, kind of looking at it through the lens of a front stage, backstage, kind of where are we from that perspective around, where are the pain, where is the pain within this process? One of the nice things is that once you start to identify that, people really engage. Typically, this is where everyone is running up to the wall with their Post-it notes, or they're making sure that you're capturing all the different pain points. People are typically not shy about it. The thing that's nice here, though, is that once you have all this mapped out, you can kind of circle back and identify, well, now we need to start looking at data to support this. How often is this happening in contrast to other processes, or and that then starts to frame the opportunity in terms of the value unlock that a particular project has. But again, what this allows you to do is see it all together, see it end to end, have everyone collectively be a part of that, and make sure their voices are heard, and also share so that everyone is fully aware, not just about their specific area and their pain points, but upstream and downstream teams as well. From there, then you get into the fun part of, all right, let's solve for this. Let's figure out what the right approach is. We use design thinking. We use, ways of kind of collaborating quickly using a method called Crazy Eights, where you're, creating a lot of ideas in a short amount of time, and then filtering that down and refining it until teams get excited about a particular approach or idea, and then kind of, looking through that as an opportunity to prototype something out, and whether that be something as a service or a process change, or an actual digital UI, and you're doing mock-ups, and whatever it may be, at some point you need to validate it, test it. Is this going to work? Is this feasible within our ecosystem? Do we have the technology that is required to actually implement this? Do we have the right policies and procedures in place? And is this going to work and really to return value for our customers? And then once you do that, then it's a lot easier to kind of say, okay, here now is what we've agreed upon in terms of our future state, right? And you can start to break this out into phase 1 MVP and phase 2 and so on. And again, you're collectively doing this as a group so that everyone has a say and everyone is agreeing upon the priority or prioritization around how we're going to solve for this particular problem, and getting people out of their silos, getting people out of their specific groups and areas and teams, and thinking about the project from an ecosystem perspective, and really thinking about it end to end collectively, right, front stage and backstage. So a couple things I want to highlight before we wrap up, and then we'll jump into Q&A. Critical that you bring in the right stakeholders, right? You want to make sure that you're inviting people who are going to have and represent each of the parts of that process, and whether they're representing a part of the backstage or they're representing a part of the front stage, you want to make sure you're having that diversity there so that you're including everyone within that process. And for whatever reason, if someone can't participate in that workshop, schedules are always tough. That's where, you can kind of advocate for them, right? Do some of that research ahead of time, make sure you're getting all of their input, and then you represent that particular team. It's not the same, you're not going to get the same level of engagement, but you can kind of help fill in some of those blanks if for whatever reason they can't participate in those specific workshops. The goal that you should always be driving towards is mapping the park, mapping your ecosystem, mapping your organization to create shared understanding, right? So it's not necessarily just to get everyone's pain points about, from the call center, right? Although, they're going to make sure that at the end of the day, here's all of the problems that we face when we're picking up calls in the call center. It's not just about the problems that clients have on the .com site or through the mobile app. Although, right, you want to make sure you're capturing all of that. It's so that people have that now shared understanding, that perspective to say, hey, if we start to look at this as an opportunity from end to end, from a service design perspective, where should we be focusing our attention, our energy, our money, our technology to make sure that we're solving the right problem the right way, so that we're not just putting band-aids on downstream pain points, but they're actually solving for upstream root cause problems, right? And so that we know that if we solve the problem in the right place with the right solution, then everyone benefits throughout the entire process there. And I think the other thing too that you have to keep in mind is an organization like Schwab or any financial services company, there are always going to be trade-offs. So this is not about creating the perfect solution. It's really about creating that shared understanding to say, we're going to focus on this area first because we think there's the most bang for our buck there. That's going to make the most impact. And this other piece here, we know it's still going to be a pain point, but it's something that we can wait on a little bit. Maybe it's part of phase 2 or phase 3, because this is the piece that we want to focus on first. And collectively as a group, as part of that shared understanding, everyone can kind of make that decision together versus trying to compete for dollars, for technology, for prioritization within an organization. You can collectively work together on that and ultimately build the right solution and the right future together through that process. So that's it for my presentation. I really appreciate the time. Looking forward to jumping into Q&A and talking more about service design and service blueprints and some of the challenges that you guys are facing. I'd love to hear more about and talk more about opportunities where service design can be implemented to be a help and be a provider of a long-term and end-to-end solution for your company. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Mike, thank you so much. What a fantastic way to close out the day.
Thank you, Ethan. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and looking forward to getting into some Q&A here.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, Disney is such a great example. I think that cognitive dissonance of, I can just picture seeing Goofy walking around with a Marvel character or something like that. And that's kind of, you almost see that sometimes. It's like, oh, I'm on chat and I'm on phone support and now I'm back to this. And it all gets very messy. So it feels very real to me.
Yeah, it was funny. We were talking to one of our executives, and I just started sharing with him this idea around the utilidors, and he stops me right away and he says, Mike, I was just at Disneyland, and I'm looking around the park and thinking, how do they do this, right? And I was like, yeah, this is it. This is how they do it. They have a whole behind the scenes system in place. So yeah, people connect with it in a lot of unique ways, and some of it's pretty, there's a lot of emotion attached to it, which is cool.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we do have some questions, so I'm going to jump into those here. First one, is service blueprinting a core piece of every service or process, or do you have to prioritize what you're approaching?
Yeah, I wish it was. I'll say number one there, but it's not. And some of that is around staffing and resource and time. So you're constantly trying to figure out where it makes the most sense, and then also too, you're dependent on the stakeholders that you need to work with, right? So sometimes that can be a bottleneck as well. So I do think it can be, and some of the things that you see. For other companies and other examples I've seen online is sometimes you can actually push some of that down into the reps themselves, into people in the branches. Blueprinting is not a difficult concept to understand, and you can ask them, hey, can you actually just start putting some of this stuff down on a piece of paper, or put it into a PowerPoint, and just start breaking down what you see from a front stage, backstage perspective, and most of the time people are pretty excited to do that. So sometimes that can be a workaround if you can't get everyone collected together for a workshop. But those are some of the bottlenecks we have. It's staffing, it's time, and then it's getting everyone coordinated around schedules to actually participate.
Totally. Yeah, no, I'm sure that resonates with a lot of people here. Constraints and I guess to your point, doing it informally isn't always the worst idea. Sometimes we get caught up with
Exactly.
this formalized way of doing stuff, and it's like, no, let's just start the work.
Yeah.
So that's a great. So another question here: how do you make that shift from outlining the place you're at now, so the current state, to actually thinking about
Mhm.
the future state solutions? How do you kind of turn that corner? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll just say, I'll admit, in most of the companies I've worked at, and including Charles Schwab, solutioning is typically not something that you have to ask people to, put their solutioning hat. They're already there. They're coming in with their kind of future state ideas. So it's usually the opposite of where you have to kind of help people stay focused on current state, and then get all of those ideas, and whether or not you parking lot them, or whatever it may be, an idea bin, however you want to handle that. But then at some point you got to flip the switch and say, okay, now let's go into solving it. I think for us the critical moment there is when you come to a collective agreement around problem definition. And that's really one of the great things about service design, is that it allows everyone to focus on an agreed upon definition of the problem, or the kind of the core set of problems. And from a design standpoint, like that's the trick, right? I mean, you want to start there in terms of truly understanding the problem before you move into solutioning and ideation. So once you get to that place, and it usually happens, fairly quickly. It doesn't, as long as you have everyone involved, and all the right stakeholders in place, usually you can get to that agreed upon definition pretty quickly. Once you have it, that's typically your indicator. Make that switch. You can move now into future state ideation. What are the solutions that will address these kind of core problems that you're having?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess so. Jumping back a little bit earlier in the process, when you've gone through some of that blueprinting, how are you surfacing and sharing these artifacts? Is it more of a workshop setting where you're walking in detail through them, or more just like, hey, here's an email?
Yeah, I'll say it's all the above, and some of it is kind of just trying stuff out and lessons learned. I will say there is a part of where you want to have full transparency. So we've thankfully, one of the byproducts of kind of the virtual environment that all of us are in now is that Schwab has invested into Mural as our kind of virtual whiteboard, which is great, because prior to that, it was tough. We were dealing with Confluence pages and PowerPoint decks, and so it was tough to kind of get stuff out. And so with Mural or any type of virtual whiteboarding, you can be more transparent. You can make sure that people have access to that, so they have visibility into kind of how the sausage is made. They can see where you're at. And but I do think there is something to be said for curation. And so at some point you do want to kind of gather up kind of the key outputs, or key kind of ahas, or key decisions, or whatever it may be, insights, and then curate that up into something that's a little bit more presentable at the executive or business level. And so there's a balance there, of that transparency and visibility, but then you want to be able to also clean that up, make it more concise, intuitive to consume, especially for your more executive audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Knowing your audience is so important for sure. So,
Yeah.
Mike,
Yeah.
thanks so much. This has been fantastic. A great way to close out the program. So we really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.